It's almost a year and a half ago now that Yoshitani Roshi came from Japan and we held these opening ceremonies for this temple, Sensoji. And there was a conversation around that time. I was trying to explain to someone why he was coming and what we were going to do. And I was saying, please come, and there will be chanting, there will be lots of bells. And they said, oh, I see, you're going to consecrate the space. And I had to think about it for a long time. And in that moment, what I said was, yeah, something like that. And I think I've even used the word since because it's so handy. This idea that we're going to take this building, we're going to make it something else. We're going to make it something sacred by chanting and bowing and by having these people come. But that's not really what we do. That actually has nothing to do with this practice at all. I wanted to speak to that a little bit today because it's been on my mind. It's on my mind because next week I'll be going to Peru, where a friend of mine, old friend, is becoming the abbot of. There will be these big ceremonies, and all these priests will gather, and there will be a lot of chanting. It's the same ceremonies that we'll be doing here next June at Sensoji. And whenever I step into that space, that kind of very ritualized space, I describe it to others, and there's, I think, reasonably a question sometimes of, but why? Why does it have to be like that? Why, why is it so formal? Why are there so many rules? Because there are a lot of rules. You have to have this many people in the room, and ceremonies have to be conducted in a particular way. What's up with that? And when I hear that kind of questioning from people, I kind of discover that line of questioning anew for myself. What is this? But when I go down that rabbit hole, it takes me to something that I think is fundamental in this practice, in this body of teachings. And I thought I would just take a moment to say it out loud. There is nothing in this practice that we make from something else. There is no particular attitude that we have to bring to an activity to make it real. There's a lot of talk in this larger Buddhist tradition about intention, right? The thing that makes something, the thing by which we measure an activity or a behavior or a choice or whatever, it's the intention, right? Did the person have good intentions? And from that, we determine if the thing was good or bad, if the choice was more right or more wrong. In the same way, there are a lot of teachings, not just in Buddhism, but I think across the religious world, that, that if we arrive at something with a certain kind of spiritual mind, we infuse the thing or the activity with that spiritual mind. And in doing so, we transform it. An example that someone brought up to me recently was that when traditionally across a number of cultures, people who create Buddha statues, there's a practice involved. There are things they should be chanting as they do it. There's a kind of um, understanding that they're supposed to bring to the act. And then it goes a step further to say that if you don't do that, if you don't bring that understanding, and if you don't create this ritualized atmosphere, that then the Buddha that you made isn't really a Buddha. It's just it's just a it's just an image. It doesn't really count. Another example relevant to some of us here are that some of us are sewing a robe together. And there's a lot of instruction about how to do it. Beautiful instruction saying that, for example, with every stitch we take refuge. So people do one stitch and they say, I take refuge in Buddha. And then with the next stitch, I take refuge in Dharma. And then the next stitch, I take refuge in Sangha. And if it requires 10,000 stitches, then that means we take refuge 10,000 times, which is beautiful, and which I recommend if you're sewing. But we don't want to misunderstand. If we take up a practice like that, we can fall into imagining that if I don't do it like that, then this robe won't be the real robe. It'll just be a quilt. And so in order to infuse this thing with spiritual power, I have to put in some of my own. And by doing that, I will make it more than what it is. It's a very appealing idea. Zen, in this tradition, Zen as I have been taught, in the way that I understand it, is much simpler than that. But in some ways a little bit harder to understand. The idea that if I do this just right, that the outcome will be just right, makes so much sense. But what this tradition really says, what it really offers, is not that the robe becomes the robe because I sew it in a particular way. It's that I sew it in a particular way because it's the robe. That I handle the cloth with a certain care and I take refuge with each stitch because it's already real. It's already complete. It's already everything that it needs to be. And when I encounter that thing, that amazing thing, I want to treat it with reverence. And so I do, and this is what that looks like. It's not me creating something, it's me acknowledging something. When we open this temple, it doesn't mean that the day before there wasn't a temple here. It's that we all come together and we bow and we chant and we offer incense and flowers and food and tea because it's whole. Because this is how you treat a temple. This is what it means to come in. This is what it means to say hello. It flips our natural way of thinking on its head. But if we explore this if we really explore this, I think it has the potential to change everything about what we do. We meet someone and we bow, and some of you have heard me complain. There's so many ways to talk about bowing. One of the ones that really pushes my buttons, even though again it's lovely, is this story that when I bow to you and you bow to me, that it's the Buddha in me bows to the Buddha in you. It's a very sweet idea. It suggests that there's this little thing inside me that is reaching out and kind of activating this little thing inside of you. But that isn't why we bow. If I bow to you, it isn't because I'm trying to make you into something, and it isn't because I'm trying to see your essence, or because I see who you are deep down, the real you. I bow to you because you're you. When you bow to a person, don't bow to your idea of the person. Bow to the actual person who is in front of you. Bow to that person as a Buddha, not as someone who carries a little Buddha part, but as a Buddha recognizing a Buddha. Not in a generic way, but in a specific way. This Buddha who is you. I'll be doing these ceremonies next week. They're very refined. There's a lot of study that goes into them. When I arrive, I'll be handed a stack of paper, and I'll be doing a lot of reminding myself, oh yeah, and then this person does this, and then this person does, and I'll do this, right? And when we all hear this bell, we all do this. And again, it's natural, it's reasonable to say, but why? Because of course, it doesn't have to be that way. But when we do it in that way, I think what we're doing is we're looking for a way, we're looking for the decorum. How do I acknowledge this temple? How do I acknowledge this person? The new abbot is not someone who showed up yesterday. The new abbot, is almost always the case, is someone who has been doing that role. They've been there. And there's a moment when everybody chooses to say, we recognize that. We see not that you're becoming the abbot today, but that you've been the abbot. We know, and we want you to know that we know. So we're going to get really dressed up. And we're going to make sure that you know that we know. We're going to arrive in a temple and treat it the way we treat any temple, the temple. No discrimination. Within that mind, there's no temple that is big or that is small. or better or worse. There's just the one in front of you. And you're someone who sees it. So you act like it. This goes to the core of what we do in Zazen. We are reminded over and over again that we sit in this way not to become a Buddha, but because we are Buddha. And I know that's a big idea. I know it's a hard idea because I talk with people about it all the time. This struggle of, I do Zazen, but I know it isn't real because I'm just thinking about other stuff, or I'm just fighting sleep. I'm just waiting for the bell to ring. But if I could do it right, if I could position my heart in the right way, then Zazen would really be Zazen. But that story is exactly the same story of I'm making a Buddha. That story is completely lacking in faith in the practice. And so we sit up straight, not because we're making Zazen Zazen. We sit up straight because it's already here. And wow, this is where I am. Doing the practice of all awakened beings. I'm right here. I'm going to show up for this. This matters to me. And so sometimes Zazen is you being sleepy and being distracted. And sometimes it's you being very present and intentional. But Zazen is not more or less depending on what you're doing. It's just that you are more or less attuned to what it actually is. That's all. We speak with kindness to a partner or a friend. And if we're not careful, we fall into thinking that we're doing it because we want to make the relationship better. We want to make the other person respond in the right way. And so this simple gesture, this kind word, moves from being an offering to being a means or a tool. When what we could do is be kind, we could say the kind thing because of what's already there. Not because we're trying to transform it, but because we're trying to respect it. In that space, there is no succeeding and there is no failing. You can't get an A and you can't get an F. because the thing is what it is. And it's enough to merit your attention. It's enough to merit your kindness. It's enough to merit this decorum that you bring to it. This goes for relationships, it goes for objects, it goes for moments, it goes for breaths. This is at the heart of Dogen talking about practice verification. Practice doesn't take us somewhere. Practice is whole. And when we do it, we get it. This isn't a thought exercise for a day or a week. This is a practice for your whole life. To meet moments and people and things as if they don't need us to make them better. To engage in the power of something as it is without falling into the idea that it needs something more from us. I will be working on this for the rest of my life. And that's what's been on my mind. And that's where I'll stop.